Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Getting to Know the Ambassadors of Agile Academy. Today, I'm super happy to host Tricia Broderick with me. And Tricia and I have known each other now for many, many years. We'll probably explore that as we go through the conversation. Tricia, welcome to the show.
I'm happy to be here. Even if it's virtually, I'm still happy to be here.
Yeah, right. I mean, right now you're in the US, I'm here. It would be like a waste of time, money, and especially like carbon.
Would it?
I don't know. There will be opportunities for us again to meet up in person. I'm sure about that. Now, Tricia, you are one of our dear ambassadors. Actually, one of the people that became an ambassador more or less on day one. You and I had conversations at the end of last year, and I pitched you what we are planning to do, and you were like, "I'm in." And I was not expecting this that quickly. So that makes me really, really proud and really appreciative of you, and also the commitment that you've given to this, being a track owner for Agile Facilitation. But we'll talk more about these things as we go through this conversation. So similar to all the other ambassadors that I've interviewed so far, I want to start with your personal Agile journey. Where did this whole thing start? When did it start? Why did it start, right? And what were those early experiences that you had with the topic of agility?
So I like to say I'm a little bit fortunate in that I had a colleague give me the Extreme Programming book in 1999. And we decided for a financial institution client that we were going to use Extreme Programming to write a J2E web app, but teach them how to write a J2E web app. So we did short releases. We did, in my head, I had locked this approach, this framework into this facilitates teaching the client how to write a J2E web app, right? And it was wonderful. It was lovely. And it was great. It was successful and all those things, but I had like locked it in my head. Like this was for teaching. Like I needed as a lead developer to teach another developer how to write a J2E web app. And so we did short releases, we did integrate, we did pairing, all of those things. And so then I went right back to waterfall after that on the next project, because I was like, well, no, that was for teaching, right? Like, okay, I was young or younger, and all sorts of things. And then fast forward, and again, I had another colleague on this huge government project go, we're going to use Scrum in 2005 on a huge, massive government project. So I like to say that I got introduced to Scrum, but I was really the queen of faking Scrum in 2005. We had perfect burn downs. We did all sorts of things. I don't think we followed one rule of Scrum probably at all. And so as Ken Schwaber would say, then you weren't really doing Scrum, right? But that was my next exposure. But there were things that I started kind of going, okay, we're not doing that correctly, but there's something here. And I didn't know about the manifesto at this time. I didn't know anything about Agile. I got exposed to the two frameworks first. Mm-hmm. And I started kind of going, something's here. I want to explore this. I'm frustrated. I had gotten tired of the constant, like, who's going to call chicken first in terms of delivery and cause the change request and not delivering value, or delivering things and then realizing nobody was going to use it. And so I started feeling myself getting more and more frustrated around 2006 timeframe and my delivery and my projects and things. So I attended my first Agile Alliance conference in 2007. How I got exposed to it, how I found it, I have no idea. I can't remember those details. But I attended that one, and I was a kid in a candy shop, and yet also totally freaked out. I was like, oh my gosh, we could do that. I can't do that. Like, I mean, I think I had a panic attack in Lisa Atkins' first session I attended of hers, where she was like, if you're a great Agile leader, this will be your resume. And she held up a blank sheet of paper. And I think I actually had like a full blown anxiety moment in this session, right? That moment. But I then went every year to the Agile Alliance conference since 2007. And that was then my additional journey, and then really understanding what Agile meant, and what this whole community was about, what the purpose was. But that was the early stages. So I actually got exposed to frameworks first, and then Agile in the manifesto. But it wasn't it wasn't until 2007, and then someone corrected me, like, that was still pretty early, Tricia. But for me, it was my first exposure was 1999.
1999.
Yeah.
That's a really
To
long.
Kent Beck.
I think. I
Kent
mean,
Beck's work, man.
yeah. I mean, that was not long after Kent published Extreme
No.
Programming Explained, right?
Yeah, no, I still am in contact with that particular colleague, and I'm grateful to him that he was one of those people, like, what's new, what's out there, what can I explore, and he brought it to the rest of us. That was an elite group of people I worked with at the late 90s. So
yeah, I was just having a conversation for another podcast that someone was recording and had invited me on, and she asked me, what would I consider to be like one of my key strengths of the leader? And I said, it's curiosity. Like, really being curious about what's the new stuff out there, how can we experiment with this, but then also be open-minded, but also figure out, like, it's not working for us, all right, so let's shelve it. Now, your colleague was curious in 1999, introduced you to XP. You did this as a teaching thing for your client, and then you shelved it for yourself. Yep. And you were earlier laughing about this, right? I was young when I was younger. But what I see happening is a lot of organizations, and maybe you have had some similar experiences, they do some kind of pilot projects. They apply Scrum, XP, whatever, could be Kanban, whatever. It actually works. And then they still find the excuse and say, it's not going to work in the rest of the organization because this group of people is special, or this product is special, or they have like certain other constraints that are special. Have you seen that happen as well?
Yeah, and I'll take it even one step forward. So I agree with all of that. I also think I was afraid of letting go of what was comfortable to me too.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what I had built my skills around, what I had known, what I had delivered up to, like, I was successful up to this point, right? So it was also scary to me. Like, I think there's a little bit of protection mode that's going in there. And that was part of it. It's like, no, I know how to do change requests. I know how to, like, I was like, no, I'm a great project manager. And I didn't want to let go of that identity, honestly, because it had gotten me to this stage. And so yes, I think there's a lot of hurdles and things that we can create in the organization, but I also think it's on an individual level too.
Yeah.
I had associated extreme programming with teaching, that was the reason it worked. And so it wasn't going to work in this other environment. And so I did that very thing. But honestly, I don't even know, if I'm really honest with myself, I'm not even sure I really even explored it. I just went with what the status quo was. Right. Yeah. I just went with the expectation of this is how you deliver. And I just went with it. And because I was still young enough, I wasn't going to rock I wasn't going to be like, oh, we just did this other thing. And so I was careful about it. I was in self-protection mode.
Yeah. And I think the identity piece that you mentioned earlier plays a huge role, because there's this saying, right? Never change a running system, or never change a winning team. And for me, this is one of those things that is said so easily, but it can have a lot of implications if people really believe it. Because if you don't change the winning team, at some point you're going to lose. But instead, you could still embrace the mentality of continuous improvement, no matter whether you're winning or not, right? Continuously improve. And that makes a huge difference. There's a cat behind you.
It's my dog, and he never comes in here. And I think he's confused because my green screen is gone.
All good. All good. Doesn't matter. Authenticity. Now, Tricia, so 1999, first experience. 2005, Scrum. Where do you see the main differences? Because some people that listen to this might not be aware of extreme programming in the first place. And then secondly, what the differences are, the key differences between extreme programming and Scrum, and where you see the overlap.
So I'm a very framework agnostic individual in general. I'm not a purist of any one framework. I'm not a person that's like, oh, you have to do every single step of those things. But I am somebody that's like, you have to understand what that is about and what what it was for and the why behind it, so that when you do break a rule, you're being intentional about it and all those things. And
Exactly.
so I incorporate a lot of different XP practices and elements into things that are in Scrum. Like a common one is user stories, like, and people thinking that that's a Scrum practice when in reality it's an XP practice. But I think the easiest way that a lot of people do, and I don't know if honestly the authors of these frameworks would love it the best if I use this wording, but I tend to use this in a truly simplified version. In a lot of ways, XP helps me level up the technical excellence.
Yeah.
Scrum tends to help me create training wheels for people to learn how to plan a little, do a little, learn a little. And so I don't think there is a competition between the two. I don't think that they're against odds against each other.
They're complementary.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I would argue you won't really be successful still delivering value if you're not working on your technical excellence. And you could do every single step of Scrum perfectly and still not deliver value if you're not willing to discover that value, if you're not willing to live the principles and those things. Or if you don't have continuous integration going or different practices, you won't really get the full benefit even in Scrum. So I tend to look at it from that lens when I'm incorporating people with different things, is like, what practices in XP specifically will help you level up your technical excellence and that focus on collaboration. I think that's the other thing that XP does really, really well in terms of that team orientation and bond. And then looking at Scrum going, here's some training wheels. I actually said that to Ken Schwaber the first time I met him. And I think he was a little evil with this because he just had a name badge that said Ken. And I didn't know he was Ken Schwaber. I didn't know what he looked like, right? And he was actually talking to me because I was the director of development for an organization and of a product that he loved. And so he had approached me. And so we're chit-chatting, talking, and then he says, what do you think of Scrum? And I don't know that I'm talking to Ken Schwaber. So I go, it's been great training wheels for my team. And before I could say anything else, Alistair Coburn had walked up just in that moment. And I had already met Alistair, so I didn't know him really well at that point, but I knew enough of it. And he was like, hey, Broderick, hey, Schwaber. And I went, Ken Schwaber. Oh, crap. Did I just insult this man? And he was like, oh, she gets it. And so he would, at least in that moment back, and this was probably, I think this was in 2011 at the 10-year mark in the Agile Alliance conferences, I think when this happened. And, but it gives me a nice rhythm for that curiosity, right? Learn, plan a little, do a little, learn a little. And if you don't get it right, try it again and try it.
Exactly.
And so I look at it from those perspectives versus any one individual technique or practice or event within them.
Yeah, no, makes absolutely sense. Now, I'm just picking up on the last element you mentioned earlier, 2007 Agile Alliance Conference, Lissa Atkins.
Yeah.
The magician. That's how I refer to her.
Yeah.
The magician, right?
There's a couple people that stand out for me from that very first round. And Lisa was one, David Hussman was one, Jean Tabeka was one. And
yeah, rest in peace.
Yes. And actually, Jean and David, I think it was either 7 or 8, they did a session together. So, and I think she was barefoot. Like, I think she had taken her shoes off. But that was one of the coolest things about the community. And for me, it still rings true. I don't know if I could speak for everybody, but for me, it still rings true, is the accessibility, right? Of just the influence and the impact in the community as a whole. That's why it did feel like, even though it was challenging me, it did feel like a kid in a candy store. And the things that I was learning and getting exposed to, and even if I didn't really like it at times with it, but yeah.
Yeah. All right. That's really interesting. Now, 2007, you embark on that journey. You go to Agile Alliance conferences every year. You learn a ton, both in terms of what is this whole Agile thing, what kind of new frameworks out there, how can we connect those things to each other, but also you get to know a lot of people. Now, at some point, what kind of turns does your career take as you embark on that journey? Because you've not always been a consultant. You've also had different jobs, right?
Yes. Well, and I actually do think I've always in my career had kind of this like consultant for a little while, practitioner for a little while, consultant for, so I've done that throughout my entire career. Although this is the longest I've stayed consultant on this tail end with it. I'm supposed to say something probably like, oh, I had this like 5-10 year plan. I didn't. I didn't at all. I was one of those people that opportunities kept being presented, and I often took them regardless of pay, regardless of title, regardless of situation. If it was a challenge and an opportunity of something to learn, and to help, I usually went after it. So I think what the interesting part now in hindsight, looking back and doing things, what a lot of the agile journey and information things, I think it accelerated my path into leadership in a way that I didn't realize. I used to say, I don't ever want to be in management. I'm not going to lose my tech cred. I am a coder forever. like that was my safety. That was, again, my identity with those things. And that was part of what gave me the, oh, wait, I do have some skills in this area, or I'm interested in doing this, or I can scale things. And it wasn't easy. But I think that's the part of the career is it helped me to learn how to lead in a way that I wanted to, but was not always doing. I ended up having to do a lot of apologies and a lot of like, oopsies, as I continue to learn. But I think that was part of it. It was like, how do I create the space that I wanted to work in? How do I create the space that I want so that people can deliver? And I've spent now almost 20 years really trying to learn how to lead value discovery, like delivery of work that we do not know up front. And no one taught me that up front. When I got promoted in different things, like that was delegate, learn how to do, time management, things like this, but not how to empower, not how to tap into people's creativity and innovation and create wisdom and co-intelligence with people. And so that is where I attribute majority of my, hey, Tricia, how are you the leader you are today? And it is from the Agile community, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
So from my career in terms of things, I've gone into executive roles, back to consulting, back into, leadership, other leadership roles, but now I've been in this consulting world. This is going on 10 years for me. And I do occasionally get the itch to go back to practitioner, but I still feel like I'm helping right now in ways that I want to be.
Yeah, I think this is so important, having been in the practitioner role, because I remember when my first manager at my consulting firm back then left the consulting firm, became a hospital manager. I met with her for a coffee, and I asked her, what's the biggest difference? And she's like, okay, when you are really a practitioner, you realize that the strategy that the consultants craft, that's this. The implementation is this, right? I was like,
well, it's also often theory. It's often also short term. It's
exactly.
often also neglecting like power dynamics and things that are happening in organizations with networks and connections. It's simplified, and it would be beautiful to have that simple view of things, but in reality, it's sometimes one of the reasons I was like, I don't know if I have the energy to do what I know I would need to do as a practitioner right now, which is why I stay a consultant, right? Because there's a lot of investment you have to do before you can get to those, here's the strategy.
Exactly. And I would add one more thing, is also responsibility.
Yeah.
So it's always easy from the outside to say, that's a simple decision. You just have to do this. Yeah, but what are the implications?
Yeah, just say no to that stakeholder. Just
say no to that stakeholder, or let go of that team member, or promote that person and don't promote that person. And like all of those human dynamics then resulting in the responsibility that a practitioner has is very difficult. And this is one of the reasons why I try to, when we assemble the group of ambassadors, I really want to have people that have been on the practitioner side. And this is why I was so impressed also with your journey, right? Having been so many years on the practitioner side, or as you mentioned,
Yes,
like on
whether
and
it's
off.
development on the project side, an
Exactly.
executive role, like it's a mixture too with that,
Exactly.
which was
Exactly. So
important to me.
yeah, and I always found it confusing if someone was, for example, talking about leadership and they've never been in a leadership position themselves, right? What kind of examples are you going to provide if you've never done it yourself? Doesn't mean that you always have to do it like the 100% correct way, but I think you also develop so much more empathy for the clients that you're working with if you have been in their
Well,
shoes.
yeah. I mean, half the time I sometimes joke that in my leadership trainings and things like this, I'm like, I've told you so many bad stories about things I've done. I'm sure you're wondering, why are you learning from me? Like, but that's part of the connection, right? To be able to learn, the empathy to be able to learn is like, I'm not sitting here just judging you. This was hard. I'm a type A extroverted individual who loves her check marks. Giving up control was not easy for me. And that ability to understand that struggle, that ability to understand that tension, that conflict in many different facets, then helps somebody drop down some of that cognitive dissonance, drop down some of that angst, that when they're having some anxiety about learning or trying something new, to go, okay, if she can do it, and she's obviously, then maybe I can too as
Yeah.
well. And so it's an important thing for me, and it always has been, to be vulnerable of sharing, like, no, I didn't just go from that to this. Like, it was a long, hard journey. It's
Yeah.
still ongoing.
Yeah. And it's also not only I didn't go from that to this, also I was not born this way.
No.
Right? I was not born this way. It's really a craft that one can learn through practice. And here are a few tools that have worked for me. There's a bunch of other tools out there, but let's start with something that I can share my experience with you. And then it's again like plan a little, do a little, learn a little. As you mentioned
Yep.
earlier, that's your training wheels. So now let's look at we started with your initial agile journey. Let's look now at the past 10 years that you've been primarily working with a bunch of organizations, probably on multiple levels in various industries. What were some of the most important findings, Tricia, that you had? And I want to focus on a particular topic when it comes to the topic of change, right? And letting go, right? That identity piece that we talked about earlier that kept you initially from changing or resisting that change. What have you seen being challenges within the organizations that you work with?
Yeah. It's interesting. Even when you lay it out like that, I had a flashback to when I started in this more leadership advisor role for the past 10 years. I was struggling with, do I stay a practitioner? Do I go into the consulting? What do I do? And another colleague looked at me and said, well, you can keep making a difference one company at a time, or you can start scaling. And I was like, oh. And so actually just you highlighting that and saying that right there is like, you've been able to help multiple companies. I just had this like flashback to 10 years ago going, oh, I guess that did play out that way. So that was a moment for me. And I just want to acknowledge that. I think the interesting thing that I've seen when it comes to change is a couple things. One, we like to talk about change management, but very few leaders are actually trained, skilled, or knowledgeable about what it entails to do change management for lasting change. I think there's so often this like, well, we'll go into a back corner, decide the change. We're going to go to this new tool, like even a simple change. That is rarely a simple change, but we're going to start using this new tool versus the other. We've made this decision. We've invested all this money, and then we're going to put out an edict, and everybody's going to go. And then we're almost surprised by the backlash. We're surprised by the resistance. We're, instead of going, no, that's almost like if you look at like a Virginia Satir's change response, organizational response to change, you should almost expect resistance and chaos with every change. Like it should be part of your plan in rolling it out. It's not just the tactical details of the actual implementation of the tool. It's handling the human capita. It's handling the dynamics in the system that's going to be whether or not that person adopts this new tool, or if you're going to be spending every day going, did you do it? Did you do it? Did you do it? Did you do it? And then getting frustrated because nobody's stepping up, right? And so this has become a huge area for me in terms of just helping people understand how humans individually react to change on a on a whole, stereotyped, right? But in general, how organizations react. What are things that you need to do to keep that momentum going, to get it to a place where people are saying, one of my favorite things, one of my team members ever said was, that made me realize that we had been embracing change finally, like that we are getting to a place. I had a new team member just recently hire in, and they were having a discussion about making a change. They were in their retrospective trying to decide something, and somebody was really pushing back. And one of the other team members were like, we've talked about this longer than if we just experimented and tried. And I was like, yes, yes. And how do we get to that place where it doesn't feel change, doesn't feel binary, where it's like we make this decision and then we're stuck forever, versus making it change be an experiment to explore, to learn, and then adjust and pivot. Like rarely are decisions that binary and that lasting in that regard. And even when we want them to be, they rarely are. And so I try to come away from change from a scary final decision to what can we tweak, what can we experiment with that moves us forward. And this is just something that is very, very difficult. One, because it takes different skills than a lot of leaders are aware of, let alone learn. Two, a lot of systems in place, a lot of success criteria or expectations in organizations are just about the tactical implementation and don't think, right? Not creating human, like not acknowledging knowledge workers, not creating the right space for that result, which is really what we want. It's still all centered around task-based work, where it's just put the lug nut on the tire, don't ask questions. And versus creating an environment of empowerment, creating an environment of self-organization, creating an environment of teamwork. And a lot of times the change is rarely the thing that matters. It's how the people engage with that change and what they do from that change. And these are just not topics that people are talking about. They're so short term, like what's that next little check mark and next little goal that people can't keep up. And then they're in change, fatigue.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you mentioned a couple points. One is, I think, applying to change the same type of empiricism that we would do to product development.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Plan a little, do a little, learn a little, as you mentioned earlier.
It's a mantra I have.
Exactly. I like it. I like it. I want to steal it. The next one, you mentioned at the very end, change fatigue. And I want to explore that a bit deeper with you, because what I've also seen is, there are organizations where one change follows the next change, follows the next change, and every time people feel overwhelmed, right? And then that change fatigue happens. But then I've seen organizations where they actually develop a habit of changing. And then the change doesn't feel difficult. It doesn't feel weird. It just feels natural. And people are like, yeah, of course, right? That's the next thing. And I would like to explore with you. I have some assumptions myself, but I first want to get your perspective on this. Why do we see these two very different things? Change fatigue on the one hand, and the habit of changing on the other hand.
So it's interesting because I don't see them as different things. And here's what I mean by this.
Go ahead.
When you are doing change with that plan a little, do a little, learn a little model, it's just evolution.
Yeah.
So that's just evolving. That's just learning. That's just continuing to get better. So at that point, you stop seeing it kind of as change for the sake of change. When we get fatigue is when we see change as just the sake of change, when we don't see the connection, we don't see the relevancy,
Yes.
When it's not cohesive, when it feels like you're getting whipped from 20 different directions and wait, you just told me to do this. Now I got to do this. Now I got to that's when change for the sake of change, or at least what it feels like is that, then that's when the fatigue comes in. When it's change that's just part of the evolution, part of the learning, part of the growth, I'm actually getting energized by the learning part to help us move forward further. Yeah. And so that's why I don't see them as conflicting. I see them as when you don't understand how you're applying change in the organization, then you're going to get one versus the other.
Yeah. And why you're applying it. And when you don't have that overarching story of how these things are, as you mentioned, connected, when people
Yeah.
get confused instead of having clarity.
Or they just feel like it's a change because the VP said so.
Exactly. Or because it's just the latest trend, right? And it's not connected to what do we want to achieve as an organization? What do we want to achieve as a team? What do I want to achieve as an individual, right? If you can't build that bridge or connect those dots, I think that's problematic. But what I try to always share with my clients is, hey, change doesn't have to be negative, right? Depending on how you do it, people can also be very energized, as you mentioned, by the topic of change. And that's when then the real magic happens, because you build momentum very, very quickly. And once you develop that habit of continuous improvement, continuous learning, then change is a constant. People don't even realize it anymore.
The hard part, that the other thing that I'm seeing in a lot of cases in a lot of organizations, and it doesn't apply everywhere, but what I'm seeing is and I'm going to put a disclaimer on this up front. I often sound like an executive empathizer, partially because I do have that experience, but partially also because I really don't believe that. I have never sat in a room where executives were like, who can we make miserable today? Like, it's not the goal. And even though that might be what you experience, and I'm not excusing the impact and stuff, but it's just not the intent, right? But the other thing that I'm seeing in terms of a lot of pattern that ties to this change fatigue is, you get senior leaders that have a very small window in their contracts or in their markets of what they're trying to accomplish. And they are, whether it's right or wrong, well, I mean, I have my opinions, very short-term focused. And so in a lot of cases, these changes that are causing so much change fatigue, causing so much chaos, causing so much resistance, is because it does end up feeling like, I'll just wait you out because you're going to be gone in 3 years anyways.
Yeah.
And or you're just doing this for this purpose, and it doesn't feel like an investment in the company and the customer and the product. And it is a change and a shift in cultures that I don't think is intentional, but it's very different than when you went to one company and you were there for 20 years and you founded it and you built it and you stayed with it. And this is different, where people are, on average 3 to 5 years at an organization. And that might be long for some senior leaders. And what changes are they making, with what goals, and are they really saying the whys, and do they understand? Because as we went back to the beginning, it's about investments, about the human connection. It's about all those things. And I don't think all the senior leaders are doing those things. They're looking for the check. They're looking for those big action items to highlight, not just for their contracts. I'm not saying that they're malicious, not everybody, but in a way that's what is rewarded. That's what's recognized.
Exactly.
And teams and individuals are paying the price for that. But more importantly, customers are paying the price for that, because then we get this change fatigue because, oh my gosh, I got a new CTO and now there's a whole new thing that we're doing every 3, and now it's exhausting. And honestly, it's been heartbreaking to watch so much progress being made at an organization, and then a new senior leader comes in and watching it just completely switch, and nobody understands the switch, and nobody understands why. Now they got that fatigue, right? Versus that feeling. And so it's tough. It's tough. And I say that on every level, right?
Yeah.
Because it does require everybody working together to make this change happen in a way that's productive, in a way that's positive, as you were calling attention to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just had another conversation where someone asked me, how would you characterize a truly resilient or agile organization? And I said, this might sound paradox, but it would be a calm organization. It's not chaos. It's very calm because everybody has clarity, right? In the process, and also in terms of what we're doing, in the continuous improvement. You can experience change while still being calm.
They're just able to react in a way that's healthy.
Exactly, right? And I think
they can respond to, issues that are happening, even unexpected ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they know, and this is a comment. Adam Grant put this in his book, and it's something that I've really held on to, because I will often say that I have imposter syndrome and things like this. But he ended up saying, he ended up doing a shift from imposter syndrome to confident humility. Because one of the reasons that I'm always like, no, I hold on to my imposter syndrome because I never want to sound arrogant. I don't know everything, right? So he says confident humility in the way that, like, I don't know everything. but I'm
Exactly.
confident I can learn my way towards it. I'm confident that I'll work with people to learn my way forward. And I think that that's a huge part of resilient learning teams, is that they have confident humility. They don't need to pretend that they know everything. They're not on in that area, but they understand the power of collaboration. They understand the power of co-intelligence and working together to figure out how to move forward. And they understand that that first step might not be immediate check mark, but that doesn't derail them. They just keep learning. They keep growing. They keep planning a little, doing a little, learning a little.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the term confident humility. That's
Yeah, it's
another
one of my favorite
one I
things.
would probably steal. Now, segue,
Okay.
facilitation. Facilitation.
Yes.
You took over the track owner for facilitation, Agile Facilitation. Two questions. Number one, what does it mean to you, Agile Facilitation? Number two, why are you so passionate about it?
So I started facilitating thinking that that meant I scheduled the meeting, I set an agenda, and I took notes. I was wrong. I was very, very
isn't
wrong.
that it? Check. Right?
No, very, very wrong. And then I would get frustrated because I'd be like, so and so is the only one talking, or so and so keeps doing this, or so and so is like, and we're never getting the end results. And I read the book by Jean DeBaca called Collaboration Explained, and went, oh. Oh, and then started at one of the Agile conferences learning a little bit about different facilitation techniques. And really what the goal of facilitation was and is to, and my shorthand version of it is creating a space that engages all the voices collaboratively. So when I create that meeting with whatever that purpose of that meeting is, one, am I clear about the purpose? Two, am I creating and designing an environment that allows for processing time, that allows for collaboration time, that allows for them to be angsty and have the pros and cons so that people feel heard before they're making a decision, right? I'm as a facilitator, I'm this neutral factor that is trying to create an environment where all the voices can be heard so that we can get the best wisdom towards making a final decision or whatever we're trying to move forward. And that is a far cry from taking notes. It is actually a lot of work to design, to think about what activities need to be present, to think about how the flow is going to be, to think about the dynamics and the humans in the room and what might need to be in place and agreements in place to then get them to collaboratively make a decision, versus that leader always going, oh, I'll just make it. Forget it. I'll just do it. I'll step in and make the decision because you clearly cannot. And so facilitation, my shorthand version is always engage all the voices. And that is a skill. And as Marcia Acker writes, an art and a skill, a science all in itself, right? And because there are definitely techniques, but it's an art as well. Because it's very situational based on the humans.
Yeah. So this is another one of those topics where you had initial assumptions about, and then you realize, I'm like, oh,
oopsies.
Yeah, oopsies. There is so much more to this. I mean, this goes back, I think.
And then I go on an apology tour and
exactly. Yeah, I don't know whether it was Socrates or Aristoteles or whatever. Right? The more I know that I don't know. Right.
Yeah, now I just lean into that now, 100%.
Yeah, and so now you've spent decade plus expanding your own facilitation toolkit, crafting your skill as a facilitator. Now, what are some of the few aspects? You already mentioned some of those things, right? What it's not and what it can be, like engaging all the voices. What are a few tips and tricks that you would give people that want to get a first sense of what does great facilitation look like?
So I'm going to come at this question. What's coming up for me is to come at it from two parts. One is a very learning how to facilitate yourself. And meaning, especially if you're the leader, especially if you have that responsibility and you are accountable for whatever decision they're trying to make, me learning how to be neutral, me learning how to not just quickly throw in my 2 cents, because no matter how much I would say, no, that's just my opinion, I want you to decide, I'm still the boss. There's still a power dynamic that's there. And so just for an example, technique or whatever, I started writing down like what I wanted to say in the meeting, and trying to really stay and facilitate myself and be neutral, and like writing it down. And what was fascinating was I was like, as I wrote it down, somebody else said it. And I was like, oh, didn't even know they knew that. I was like, I'm not giving space for people to highlight what their knowledge is, to participate. And I think by facilitating yourself and realizing how much you, with great intent, jump in really fast, jump in really quickly, trying with the hope of trying to move it along efficiency wise, that you are taking away from the effectiveness long term. And I think that's a huge element for a lot of leaders in particular to learn and understand when it comes to facilitation, especially if you've got the power dynamic in the room, is how to facilitate yourself. And what that might look like. And there are different people. I did the writing. Some people put different hats on. Some walk to a corner of the room. Just different ways to make you realize, am I in this role right now as neutral, or am I in this role as the hub, as the final decision maker? And what is that doing in terms of the team dynamic? The other element that then I will come at is really getting to a place to understanding. I think what's coming up for me most, and this might be too advanced, but I'm going to go there anyways, is I'll hear this all the time. Like I facilitated an executive offsite, and everybody walked in, and it was a big one. And everybody walked in and were like, John does not do activities. And I knew who John was, because he was just not the only person who didn't approach me. Everybody else approached me. And so I proceeded through and did the session as I had designed for the most part. But because I designed the activities to where it doesn't force somebody to always shout out in a loud group, it has the right to pass, it has all these different inclusive type elements to that, which are very intentional. John participated the whole day, and he came up to me at the end. He's like, I liked today, and I don't know how I feel about you, and then walked out. Like, and it was the best compliment I had gotten in a while. Like, I was like, oh my gosh. But I think one of the challenges that a lot of people have when they start learning how to facilitate is they put this thought in their head, like, nobody wants to do this. It's like a trust fall. It doesn't, it's kind of like what we were talking about before. If you have a well-designed facilitation where the activities just build on the previous activity, nobody cares about the activity. If you're doing an activity for the sake of doing an activity, now people get mad. People are not, I don't want to do a sailboat just to look at a sailboat. I want to, the sailboat is a technique that's supposed to be driving the data to help the conversation. If the focus is on the activity, then you're not designing it in a way, but a lot of people get so paranoid about it that they take the activities away. But the problem is when you take the activities away, now you introduce all the human interaction issues and challenges that people will face, and not being heard or not being seen, or conflict that turns into drama and all that kind of stuff. So I guess that second part is maybe a little two-parter, in the sense of lean into activities, but lean into activities that have purpose, that have relevancy, that have intent, that build on each other, but don't be afraid of it.
I think what you just mentioned, right? Intent. We were earlier talking about change.
Yeah.
If change,
same principles.
Exactly, right? If change has intent, people follow.
Yep.
Change doesn't. If it's change for the sake of change, people are like, why should we?
Nope.
Right?
Yeah.
Same with activities. So, Tricia, I could go on for hours.
Likewise, I always enjoy talking with you.
Yeah, same here. So we're getting to the end of our time box. Now, people already know where your journey started, more or less what you do today, the role that you will play at Agile Academy, being the track owner of Agile Facilitation, but obviously there's so much more you offer. Now, what I want to close with is, what type of clients are you looking for? What really drives your juice then? Where you become passionate about a particular client? What kind of challenges are you best suited for?
Yeah. So given just even what we've been talking about all day today, I think this will like align with that very much. So I like to say at this stage, I'm a leadership advisor that's focused on helping people ignite what's possible. And so I get excited when I see somebody that's like, I know I'm not necessarily doing it well, but I want to go to the next level. I really want to make a difference. And that sometimes looks like a single individual leader. That can look, I'm about to work with an executive team as a whole. They're like, we're not working together as a team. We're not doing this. And we want to be a leadership team. But I think in general, my ideal clients are leaders. In some cases, it's a leader also that can be somebody that's like, I want to get better at communicating, making more of an impact when I talk, right? And that could be somebody starting out and they're brand new in the career or their senior leader. So my segment client base is leaders, but they're leaders that have or want confident humility, right? They're leaders that are like, I know I don't know everything, but I want to figure it out and I'm afraid, right? And that's the ones that I get super excited about is like, it's kind of like it's the me's of before, right? Like somebody helped me see the potential in me. I want to pay that forward. And that's what gets me super excited. And I just am happy when they like I just had somebody contact me and they just did their first speaking at a conference and it's a senior leader and they're just like, they were so excited and it just makes me smile from ear to ear for days watching them accomplish something they didn't think they could and having an impact and I don't know, this world's crazy on 20,000 levels, but we can control what we can control. And if I can help a leader, that leader then helps other people. And those are the ripples that I want to invest my time in.
Yeah. Yeah. People that really are willing to learn, are willing to grow, are willing to put in
Even if
the
it's
work.
not easy, and it's not easy.
Exactly. In most cases, they know that it's not easy, but because of that, they want to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And not only with
And
the
figure
intention
out
of
what's
growing
possible.
themselves, right? Not only with the intention to grow themselves, but to contribute to whatever they believe is meaningful, be it their organization, be it society. In many cases, it's multiple things. So, Tricia, it was super interesting. Very much looking forward to our next meeting, hopefully in person. Super excited to have you with us as an Agile Academy Ambassador. And yeah, thank you for this conversation.
Thank you. The honor's mine.